My name is Kale, I'm 29. And last week my boss slapped me across the face in front of the elevators and demanded my key card. If you've ever faced something like this, comment where you're reading from. It was Wednesday, 5:42 p.m. The stale air of the office corridors already heavy with the smell of reheated takeout drifting from the break room microwave. I had just packed my laptop into its sleeve and reached for the key card clipped to my lanyard when his voice cut through the hallway like a blade. Hand it over. First, I thought he meant some document. His tone was so sharp it made me look down at the manila folder in my hand, with its corner bent from being crammed too tightly into my bag. But when I glanced up, his eyes weren't on the folder. They were fixed on the plastic card at my hip. The card was nothing special. White with the company logo printed in navy blue. Number 41027 embossed faintly along the bottom edge. It opened every door on the 12th floor, including the archive room. Especially the archive room. He stepped closer. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering just enough to make the gray walls look sickly. My shoulder brushed the cool metal of the elevator frame as I tried to keep distance. Then, without warning, his hand struck the side of my face. A sting bloomed instantly, hot and humiliating, my cheek throbbing against the edge of my glasses. My breath caught. The echo of the slap rang louder in my head than the impact itself. A smear of powder from my foundation marked his cuff. Card. Now. His voice carried a low hiss, more feral than professional. Behind him, the red LED on the elevator panel blinked 678, counting up as the car approached. Every number sounded like a warning bell, pounding in time with the rush of blood in my ears. I tasted iron at the back of my throat from biting down too hard. I handed nothing. My fingers curled tighter around the strap of my bag, sweaty against the nylon weave. His gaze drilled into me, impatient, calculating. I didn't know yet that in just 72 hours, the very same key card he tried to rip from me would become the evidence that unraveled everything he thought he controlled. The next morning at 8:11 a.m., I was in the kitchenette of our floor. The hum of the refrigerator drowned faintly beneath the gurgle of the cheap drip coffee machine. The linoleum floor was sticky from someone spilling creamer and never mopping it. I pressed my thumb hard against the ceramic mug I always used, white with a thin crack running across the handle, just to ground myself. I hadn't slept much. The outline of his hand still burned across my cheek when I washed up. Concealer covered the redness, but the mirror hadn't lied. The swelling around the rim of my glasses frame was still visible if you looked too long. He walked in as I was stirring sugar into my coffee. His shoes clicked sharp against the tile. Every step rehearsed dominance. He didn't look at me first. He went for the fridge, pulled out one of the bottled sparkling waters the company ordered in bulk, and twisted the cap. Only then did he turn. "You don't belong here anymore," he said, not raising his voice, just letting the fizz from the bottle punctuate his words. I took a sip, letting the bitterness of burnt coffee coat my tongue. "I have work to finish. Not with access to the archive. You think I don't know you've been in there?" His eyes flicked down to the lanyard still clipped at my hip. My chest tightened. That room, rows of steel cabinets, boxes labeled with dates and client numbers, wasn't forbidden to me. My position as records coordinator gave me clearance. But the way he said it made it sound like a crime. The microwave beeped. Someone's oatmeal spun lazily inside. Neither of us moved. The fluorescent lights hummed above, casting his shadow long across the countertop where my mug sat. He leaned closer, voice low. "Hand me the card before you embarrass yourself further." It wasn't the words, it was the assumption. The belief that intimidation would always work. For years maybe it had. But standing there, gripping my cracked-handled mug, I felt something shift. "No," I said. Quiet but solid enough that it startled even me. The microwave dinged as if to underline it. He froze, blinked, then forced a short laugh. "You'll regret that." He shoved the bottle cap into his pocket and walked out, his shoes striking the tile like gavel hits. The smell of overcooked oatmeal filled the kitchenette. I exhaled finally and placed my mug down too hard on the counter, a faint chip breaking from the rim. That was the first moment I knew I wouldn't keep pretending. Something inside me had moved and it wasn't going back. It wasn't the first time he tried to push me into silence. That slap was the loudest, yes, but there had been years of quieter blows that left no visible marks. I started at the company in September 2018, fresh out of graduate school, thrilled just to land a stable job with health insurance and a salary that looked bigger on paper than it felt after rent. My desk back then was near the window, sunlight hitting the fake ficus plant beside my monitor every afternoon. For the first 6 months I believed I'd lucked out. He was different in the beginning, joking in meetings, complimenting my punctuality, sliding me the better assignments. Once, when I caught the elevator at 7:03 p.m. Still in the office, he called me the backbone of this floor. I blushed, clutching the strap of my tote bag. I thought it was respect. But the tone shifted subtly. By late 2019 he stopped asking, started telling. Stay late, I need this filed. Cancel your weekend, clients want numbers Monday. Each demand dressed as normal expectation. I complied, afraid of losing the position. Then the comments. You're too soft to lead a team. No man's ever going to take you seriously with that tone. The sting of those words didn't leave bruises, but they carried the same force as his hand later would. By 2021 I was the one with the archive keycard, the only one besides him. A perk, he said, for my reliability. First I took it as trust. But when I noticed files disappearing, dates not matching, numbers misaligned in contracts, I understood it wasn't trust. It was a trap. I told myself I was imagining it. Maybe I misfiled. Maybe the missing invoice was just delayed. I didn't want to believe he was using me as cover. But then came February 2022, when my paycheck was short by $274. I brought it up. He smirked and said, You must have misread. Don't make a fuss over pennies. It wasn't pennies. It was my groceries, my bills, my survival. Now in September 2023, the stakes weren't just my paycheck. They were my record, my clearance, my reputation. If anything missing in that archive traced back to my access card, my name would burn before his ever did. I sipped the bitter office coffee that morning in the kitchenette and thought of every time I'd let it slide. Every time I bit my tongue, convinced myself not to overreact. I saw the pattern at last for what it was. This time I wouldn't be the quiet one. Friday evening, 9:26 p.m. The office was nearly empty. Just the cleaning crew's cart squeaking down the hall, the faint lemon chemical smell of floor polish trailing behind. I was at my desk, the glow of my second monitor the only light. My cursor hovered over a folder labeled Archive Q3. I shouldn't have been there. He'd already threatened me twice in 2 days. But something in me refused to leave quietly. My hand shook slightly as I swiped my key card against the reader, a soft beep granting me entry to the locked archive room. Inside, the air was cooler, drier. Fluorescent strips hummed overhead. I ran my hand along the row of steel filing cabinets until I reached drawer 14B. The metal handle was cold, almost biting. When I pulled it open, the weight of the files inside made the cabinet lurch. That's when I saw it. An envelope, thicker than the rest, not stamped with the company's labeling system. I slid it out, the paper rough beneath my fingertips, edges slightly frayed as though it had been opened and resealed more than once. Inside, photocopies of contracts, but altered. Numbers didn't line up. Dates scratched out and retyped. Tucked between the sheets was a printed email chain. My boss's initials signed off at the bottom, authorizing a transfer of $48,300. The recipient account wasn't any client I recognized. A personal account hidden in plain sight. My chest tightened. The office silence roared in my ears. I flipped through page after page, the rustle of paper too loud, afraid the cleaning crew outside could hear. One line in bold text, underlined, seared into me. Use her card log if needed. She won't question. Her. Me. I pressed the papers flat against the table, my palm sweaty against the rough surface. The words blurred for a second as my eyes stung. This was it, the proof he'd been planting everything under my access. My keycard was his shield and I was the scapegoat. I pulled out my phone, snapped quick photos. Every altered contract, every transfer. My thumb trembled, but I made sure the account number and dates were sharp. I slid the papers back exactly as I found them, down to the crease of the envelope flap. Then I locked the archive again. The keycard's beep sounding louder than it ever had. In my pocket, my phone buzzed faintly from the photos syncing. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like prey. I had something tangible, undeniable. I make a choice. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that line. Use her card log if needed. By Saturday morning, I knew blurry photos on my phone weren't enough. I needed someone who could tell me if what I held was really as damning as it felt. At 10:32 a.m., I sat across from our family's accountant in his cramped office above a bakery on Elm Street. The smell of yeast and sugar drifted through the floorboards. His desk was a chaos of calculators, receipts, and a brass lamp that cast more shadow than light. I laid my phone down. Can you look at these? Just tell me what I'm seeing. He pinched his glasses higher up his nose, swiping through the photos with slow, deliberate taps. Each time he paused, the creak of his chair filled the silence. Finally, he exhaled through his teeth. These aren't sloppy errors. They're deliberate. My throat went dry. So the transfers? Fabricated contracts, false authorizations, siphoning. $48,300 routed to a personal account. And look, he zoomed in, tapping the corner of one page. Your key card ID logged as the one accessing these files. If this surfaces without context, it's your signature on the trapdoor. The bakery downstairs slammed a tray, rattling the window pane. I gripped the edge of my chair until my knuckles ached. How long would I have if he tries to push this? He looked at the screen again, calculating. The next audit is due October 15th. That's just over 4 weeks. But if he grows desperate, he might move sooner. And if he does, you'll need airtight proof, not just images. For weeks. A deadline carved into the air between us. What do I do? My voice sounded smaller than I wanted. He set the phone back gently, folding his hands. You need leverage. Something official. Photos are a start, but you'll need corroboration, document logs, email headers, anything traceable outside your possession. If he senses you're onto him, he'll erase everything. The brass lamp flickered, buzzing faintly. I stared at its green shade, grounding myself, my cheek still sore when I pressed it absently. I nodded slowly. Then I have less than a month to turn this around. He leaned back, chair squeaking. You're sitting on dynamite, Moran. Handle it right and he falls. Handle it wrong and you're the one left in ashes. The sweetness from downstairs felt nauseating now. I tucked my phone into my bag, my decision already forming. I wasn't going to burn. Not this time. By Monday morning the plan was clear in my head. Even if my stomach was knotted tight. I reached the office at 7:18 a.m. Before most of the floor filled. The air still smelled of industrial cleaner, the windows fogged slightly from the chill outside. I slid my bag under my desk and opened my laptop, fingers trembling just once before finding steadiness. Step 1: collect the logs. Every time a key card was used, the building system registered it. I navigated through the internal portal, hidden behind layers of dull gray menus, until I found the access records. Sure enough, my card ID appeared again and again in late-night timestamps I knew weren't mine. I hit print. The machine hummed across the room, spitting page after page of black and white entries, dates and times in neat columns. 37 unauthorized entries in August alone. Step 2: compile. I slid the stack into a folder, along with my photos of the altered contracts. The folder was plain navy, the kind given out at training sessions, but in my hands it felt like weight, like ballast. Step 3: the letter. At 10:04 a.m., I dialed the number of our lawyer, the one the company usually retained for compliance issues. My voice was steady, my words clipped. I need to file a formal complaint against management with exhibits. Misuse of company funds, falsified records. I have documentation. Silence, then his low response. Bring what you have. We'll draft it. By noon, we sat across from each other at his long oak table. He leafed through the folder, pausing to adjust his tie. His pen scratched across legal pad margins, every note tightening the case. These are enough to initiate. He'll be notified of the complaint and required to respond. My hands twisted in my lap. And when he sees it, he'll understand the gravity. 48,000 is not a number that disappears quietly. Step 4: submission. Together, we prepared the formal corporate complaint with exhibits. The envelope was thick, addressed in block letters stamped with urgency. I slid it across his desk, the paper rough under my palm. Once this is logged, he said, you cannot be touched without scrutiny. You forced daylight into his shadow. That afternoon back at the office, I caught sight of him near the elevators. Someone had already told him. His jaw was clenched too tight, his tie slightly crooked as if he'd been tugging at it. Our eyes met. For the first time, he didn't stride forward. He stopped, turned abruptly, and disappeared down the hallway. A quiet shock. He'd felt it. The complaint went in on Monday. By Wednesday, ripples were already spreading across the floor. People didn't look at me the same. Some offered quiet nods. Others avoided eye contact altogether. The smell of burnt popcorn from the break room lingered that morning, but the air itself felt charged, expectant. At 9:45 a.m., my boss was nowhere to be found. His office door, usually cracked open, was shut, blinds drawn. The silence behind it was louder than any shouting he'd ever done. By noon, rumors were floating. An audit, an outside review. The word misconduct whispered at the coffee machine. Meanwhile, I was pulled into HR. Their conference room was too cold, the AC rattling above us. A folder sat in front of me, my name neatly typed on a label. "We've received your formal complaint," the HR manager said, tone measured, careful. "While the investigation is ongoing, your access rights will remain, but your duties will shift temporarily." I nodded, even as my chest tightened. "Shift how?" "You won't be assigned archive responsibilities. To protect both you and the integrity of the process." It stung. Part of me felt sidelined, stripped. But I understood. They were removing the weapon he had tried to use against me. That afternoon, a colleague stopped by my desk, sliding a post-it across. On it, a simple line, "Stay steady." "He's cornered." No signature. Just the faint smell of ink from a black felt-tip pen. Outside of work, consequences spread too. The lawyer called Thursday morning. "He's retained counsel." "He's shaken, not broken yet." His words were precise, but I could hear the undertone. This was far from over. Still, there were small wins. My paycheck, shorted in February, was quietly adjusted in the system. An extra $274 appeared in my account that Friday without explanation, but I knew. Someone had traced it back, corrected what he had stolen. At home, I stacked the printed logs, emails, and photos into a fireproof box under my bed. I owed myself that security. I owed the accountant my gratitude, too. I called him, voice low. "You were right. It's moving." He just said, "Then keep moving. Don't look back." That week, I carried myself differently in the office. Not loud, not triumphant, but steady. I asked for what I needed, and I stopped where I used to yield. When a coworker tried to hand me extra tasks, "Since you're so reliable," I pushed the folder back gently. Not mine to do. And I didn't explain. It wasn't the end, but it was a foothold, a reclaiming. The following week, the investigation deepened. Monday, 3:17 p.m. I sat in the HR conference room again, the overhead lights glaring white onto the polished oval table. A second stack of documents had been placed before me, printouts I hadn't provided. "These came from IT," the compliance officer explained, tapping the pages. "Server backups, email headers, logs." I leaned forward, heart pounding. Among them was the very chain I had photographed, only this time pulled directly from the company servers. No dispute about authenticity. No suggestion of tampering. My boss's initials. The $48,300 transfer. The instruction to use her card log. I traced the rough edge of the printout with my nail, grounding myself. So it wasn't just me. The system caught it. The compliance officer nodded. "Yes. Your evidence matched perfectly. There's no longer ambiguity." I exhaled, the tight band around my chest loosening. That evening, just as I was packing up, he appeared. Not blocking me, not shouting. Just leaning against the doorframe of my cubicle. His tie was looser than I'd ever seen, eyes rimmed red. "You think you've won," he said, voice hoarse. I kept my hands on my bag strap. "I think the truth is clearer now." He straightened, a flash of the old menace surfacing. "Do you have any idea what you've set in motion? You'll go down with me." I felt my pulse quicken, but I forced my voice calm. "Your emails came from the server. Your approvals, your accounts. It's not my card they'll believe anymore." For a second, he looked like he might lunge forward, the shadow of that night at the elevators replaying in his eyes. Instead, he stepped back, jaw clenching. He left without another word, shoes echoing hollow down the hall. I sat for a long minute, the hum of the desk fan filling the silence, before I finally stood and locked my bag. There was no way back now, not for him, not for me. The gap between suspicion and certainty had closed. The net was cast and his name was tangled in it, not mine. I walked out into the evening air, the scent of wet pavement after a brief rain sharp in my nose. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. 3 months later in December, my life looks nothing like it did. The days are colder now, frost edging the office windows by 8 a.m. But inside me the climate has shifted too. He's gone, placed on leave first, then officially terminated after the audit concluded. $48,000 wasn't the whole of it. The investigators uncovered a chain of smaller transfers, petty manipulations stacked over years. His name disappeared from the directory, his office emptied in a single weekend. No one speaks of him directly, they just say management changes. I still work here but under new rules, mine. My desk is quieter, a potted plant on the corner. My cracked-handled mug replaced by one I bought myself with a bold red glaze. I arrive at 8:45, I leave at 5:05, and I don't apologize. When someone tries to slip an extra task onto my pile, I look them in the eye and say, "That's not mine to take." The first time I said it, my voice shook. Now it doesn't. At home, I keep the fireproof box under the bed, but it's lighter now. Most of the papers returned to HR, the copies sealed in their files. What remains are just the photos and the post-it from my colleague. Stay steady. He's cornered. I keep it pinned to my bulletin board. Not as a warning anymore, but as proof that someone once saw me hold my ground. I've drawn boundaries in other places too. I call my mother on Sundays, but when she steers the talk to criticizing my choices, I end the call gently. I've started running in the evenings, not to prove anything, just to feel the air bite cold against my lungs, my own rhythm setting the pace. In 3 to 6 months, my plan is clear: finish this fiscal year, collect the bonus they owe, and then look outward, new applications, new cities, maybe even a role where the archive doors don't need guarding. This morning I stood at the elevator, the same one where his hand once struck me, and I pressed the button with a calm finger. The metal was cool, neutral. My reflection in its surface looked steady, my eyes clear. The doors opened. I stepped in alone, unhurried. And I chose myself.